They're formidable. We control our arm. We've got bones with muscles on, and we can sort of see how when you pull on a bone, it'll move in predictable ways. The trunk doesn't have any bones, and yet it manages to achieve the same kind of sensitivity of control.
How it achieves that control is the next revelation from the dissection.
What we've got here is the trunk of an Asian elephant. It has a little finger at the end. That's unique to the Asian elephant. If you look at an African elephant, it would actually have two dexterous fingers that could move in this area. But this finger can actually pick up very tiny objects, like a little peanut, and can move it around, bring it to its mouth. So what we're going to do now is look at these muscles and also at the nasal passageway. So Richard's got a cut right over here in one of the passages. This is the right nasal passage. And notice how deep down it is. There's quite a bit of muscle between the outside and where we're actually getting to the actual pipe, the actual breathing passageway or nostril. So what we're looking at now is the tip of the nostrils, two nostrils at the end of the trunk. And if we open one nostril here, this is the right nostril that's been cut, we can see that passageway as it runs the entire length of the trunk, all the way up to the skull, where it enters into the skull. So this is quite a lot of volume that this trunk is holding in here. And so what we're going to do is look at the muscles right now. So here are the muscles that are surrounding this trunk. We have some that are running longitudinally along the length of the trunk. And as they run along the length of the trunk, those on top are the ones that are going to lift the trunk up. Those on the bottom, they're going to lift the trunk down. We have muscles on the side that can bring it to the right and to the left. And we also have muscles shown here in cross-section that are actually running circumferentially around the perimeter of the trunk, and they can regulate the volume of that space by contracting it down, and some that are radial that can actually pull out and open up that space and make it much wider.
So how did the elephant get its trunk? Rudyard Kipling's version of events in Just So stories is still enjoyed today, even by evolutionary biologists.
I love Kipling's Just So stories, oh best beloved, but they are shockingly un-Darwinian. You know, the elephant got its trunk by being pulled by a crocodile. Of course, that isn't how it happened. Natural selection works in a totally different way. So it's nothing like being pulled or pushed from outside. As for what the actual selection pressure, what was the advantage of having a long trunk? Well, one possibility is it's something to do with drinking. There were other reasons why elephants became big and tall, reaching the tops of trees, for example, like giraffes. And like giraffes, that raises problems for drinking. In the case of the giraffe, the whole head has to go down. And that means the head has to be small. Elephants did it a different way. They keep the head large, which has some advantages, and they then have a long pipe leading out of the head, which is the trunk.
Even though we now understand how the trunk works, its fine-tuned dexterity never ceases to amaze. Elephants can throw darts and even paint pictures. The trunk is a classic story of evolution in action, a perfect solution to the problems of growing so big. But as the elephant grew bigger, the demands on other parts of its body grew greater. It required a lot of oxygen to keep going, so the lungs became turbocharged to cope. To see how they work, the dissection team are removing the ribs. Been a tough old job because the lungs themselves are actually stuck to the rib cage. And with John Cracknell, who's a really experienced elephant vet, John, if I saw that in a post-mortem of any other mammal, I would think I was looking at the cause of death. But this is normal for an elephant.
You're correct there, Mark. This is completely normal. This is the lungs here. In most other mammal species, what you'd expect is there's a space between the ribs and the lung surface, and it's called the pleural space. In the elephant, that's completely different. You can see here how it's attached to the ribs by this fibrous tissue, which has been trimmed away elsewhere. And the actual fibrous tissue is here, and as I lift it up, you can see the lung tissue adhered to the underside of this, which would be attached to the rib, if you imagine that as my hand. Now, this occurs on the diaphragm, on the ribs on the other side as well, and this is a hugely important difference in elephants that you don't see in other animals at all.
While the lungs of most animals float in a fluid-filled cavity just below the ribs, the elephant's lungs are physically glued to their ribs by a unique elastic connective tissue. This, in turn, is attached to muscles which, when flexed, inflate the lungs. No other mammal breathes like this, so it must have evolved for a reason.
Why has the elephant ended up with this system?
The honest answer, Mark, we don't know. But there's a lot of theories on that. One of the original ones in the sort of 70s was that it was an adaptation for being able to suck water up into the trunk. So the pressure's generated in that. If you try sticking two hoses up your own nose and sucking water up, it's very, very difficult. However, new current thinking, looking at evolution, it looks like the elephants adapted from marine mammals, and this is actually an adaptation to being able to swim and snorkel. If you imagine when you're snorkeling in the sea, you're kind of on the surface of the water and you've got the small tube about sort of say long, and there's a bit of resistance there. Imagine you're an elephant and you have a sort of 2-metre long trunk, and then you're submerged much further down with a lot of water pressing on you. You need a lot of force to be able to open that up, and I think this is what it's for.
It's thought elephants may have evolved reinforced lungs to withstand the extra pressure of snorkeling so deeply underwater. In fact, we now believe that the elephants' ancestors relied on water to support their bodies. Even today, elephants are at home in the water, thanks to an evolutionary adaptation in their distant past. Our dissection team has been piecing together the inner workings of the biggest eating machine that walks the earth. So far, we've seen how its trunk provides a constant stream of food, how its grinding teeth break it all down, and how its guts expanded to cope with this relentless diet. But being so big has its downsides. On the inside, the guts generate vast amounts of heat as the food ferments, while on the outside the elephant's skin absorbs heat from the African sun. It's a wonder they don't suffer meltdown, especially as elephants are not able to sweat. Scientists in Africa are trying to work out what's going on. I was looking forward to meeting one brave researcher who's managed to persuade elephants to swallow thermometers to see how they get rid of that heat.
It's a tiny little device that's called an eye button.
So in here is the ability to actually, there's a thermometer essentially, an electronic thermometer.
Yes, there's a little thermistor that records the temperature. It's coated in wax, and that's attached then to a 20-centimetre ribbon. It's so that we can find it easily in the bolus, in the dung. And that gets coated in a little bit of chocolate. So it's a little bit of a treat, and they get a little chocolate truffle.
You still haven't got it in the digestive system, though.
Not yet,
and that's
no.
the bit I'm interested in. This is a really tricky technique to get this right, because they have to use water to get the elephant to start swallowing before they lob it in, so it gulps it down without actually realising it's there. Well, that's the theory, anyway.
It went in. So hopefully now we'll just wait a couple of hours to a couple of days, and hopefully it will come out in the feces. Good boy.
Over the next 24 hours, Nadine's equipment will work its way through the elephant's guts. It'll record the elephant's body temperature every 5 minutes, day and night. Then it's just a matter of recovering the equipment.
But you need a nice, fresh, steaming pile, don't you?
Yeah.
Some here.
There we go. Just sort of move it around and mush it around.
You're a tool-using mammal, so you use